Well, hi there. Happy
Hi.
fall. Almost fall.
Happy fall.
I mean, we're still sweating, but
Hmm.
once that calendar page turns to August, it starts to feel like summer's over, which is crazy because August is hot and it's still summer in my mind. But
Hmm.
we know that so many of our listeners really kind of start our new year, or I say that with air quotes, new year, when the school year starts, whether we have kids still going off to school or not,
Yeah,
because we've
it's
had
true.
so many years, right?
Hmm.
Of of that, but also because summer just for everyone is a little more relaxed. Like at church, things are more relaxed. At work, things are more relaxed. And so a lot of the world, I think in the United States, operates kind of on the school year. So welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the school year. We're going to be talking about daily routines because for many of us, we're out of our routine in the summer, and it's a really good time as we go back into fall to think about what do I want to do every day and how do I make that happen? And I will say, I'm just going to give our listeners a little taste of what we do before we start recording every episode is we say a prayer. And often we're praying for a guest if we have a guest, and we pray for our listeners that the conversation will hit well and meet needs and be encouraging and be life-giving. And I just want our listeners to know Krista prayed for me and my family. And she pictured a tornado, and that feels very appropriate. In fact, we had a tornado just outside of Denver that actually landed last week from when we were recording this. And my youngest daughter was at a basketball camp in the city where the tornado hit down. And so she was in the basement of the camp. But that does feel a little bit like my life this summer is one big tornado. And routines can act as grounding markers throughout our day. One, to help us live our priorities out, but two, to just give some structure.
Hmm.
Because in this summer, I have felt like lack of structure just because kids are older. So they are having their own schedules. And here I am trying to live with them. And it feels really chaotic. And we've had some big trips, which have just interrupted the routines. You go on vacation, which is a wonderful thing. It's a gift. I'm so grateful. But we're getting back in that mode. So today we are going to hear from our very own Krista Gilbert because she is our resident routine expert. And she is going to give us lots of insight about the benefit of daily routines and maybe some things for us to consider as we head into fall. So, Krista, why do you think daily routines are important?
Well, I really like what you were just talking about, that they serve as a re-anchoring, so to speak, that we've been this little boat out, sailing around in the ocean. Um, and some waves up and down, and we've had our ups and our downs in a good way this summer, but that this provides a little bit of an anchor that sets us up for success. So it stables us, one, but two, it allows us to really put in practice systems that are going to get us where we want to go and other people in our lives. So, and that starts with us. I mean, and we talk about this a lot, I know, but I really believe it, that for us to bring the healthiest version of ourselves, we have to actually invest in ourselves. And that benefits everyone around us when we do. And
Mm-hmm.
so the systems not only benefit us personally, but then ultimately they benefit everyone else because we're coming to the table whole. And even if we don't feel completely whole, we at least feel like we're investing in healthy ways that care for our inner place, which the inner affects the outer in every single way. So I think it's just a time for us to say, okay, we're going to set these routines for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah. And they help us with our mental weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't have to decide.
Yeah.
what I'm going to do to work out today if I have a routine. I
Right.
don't have to decide what I'm going to have for breakfast. I mean, you get to decide which routines you want to invest in. But for me, I have decision fatigue
Mhm.
so hard in my life. I have to make
Mhm.
so many decisions, and this takes some of those out. And I think that frees us up mentally to be able to pay attention to people or to projects that we want to be paying attention to.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And we're going to talk more about that, the pre-decisions.
Okay.
But let's start with one of my faves, Atomic
Mm-hmm.
Habits. You know that I love this book. I love James Clear. I just think there's a reason this is a millions bestseller because
Mm-hmm.
it's so good. But let me just start us off with a little passage from the book, the beginning of the book. It is so easy to overestimate the importance of one defining moment and underestimate the value of making small improvements on a daily basis.
Mm.
Too often, we convince ourselves that massive success requires massive action. Whether it is losing weight, building a business, writing a book, winning a championship, or achieving any other goal, we put pressure on ourselves to make some earth-shattering improvement that everyone will talk about. Let's just
Yes.
pause there. It's so true.
Mm-hmm.
Like we want the big thing. Meanwhile, improving by 1% isn't particularly notable. Sometimes it's even unnoticeable, but it can be far more meaningful, especially in the long run. The difference a tiny improvement can make over time is astounding. Here's how the math works out. If you can get 1% better each day for 1 year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day for 1 year, you'll decline nearly down to zero. What starts as a small win or a minute or a minor setback accumulates into something much more. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. So, I mean, we know this from money, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
tell this to
Yeah.
my kids all the time, my young kids. I'm like, all right, this is like you're 20. And if you invest, like we show them on the
Mm-hmm.
graph, if you invest this much now, look at where that's going to be when you're 40, as opposed to if you just start at 30 and look at where it is at when you're, I mean, it's like crazy difference the year, like
Mm-hmm.
just 10 years makes, right? And I think we don't apply that to habits and routines. And yet that's exactly what he's saying is that, and he also uses the example, which I like of, if an airplane takes off, and it heads just a couple of degrees off from, let's say it's going from Seattle to New York, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just a couple of degrees off, it'll go to a completely different place,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when we just set our habits and our routines, it actually helps us not only to get to where we're going, but it points us in a direction that ultimately, over time, that compound interest makes us way better as people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And 1%, if I think I just need to be 1% better than yesterday,
Yeah.
that feels doable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in most things, a 1% improvement is a really, really low bar.
Yes,
So that feels
exactly.
doable.
And that's why I think it's so encouraging
Mm-hmm.
is it's what we repeatedly do matters. And the other way I like to talk about it is that with every action, we're casting a vote of who we want to be. So if I get up and I say, I'm going to pray, like that's one of my things is I want to invest in my soul before I invest in my body. So I'm just like, okay, all I have is 10 minutes today, but some days I have a half an hour, but some days I just have 10 minutes. I'm going to read scripture and I'm going to pray. So I'm casting a vote on what matters to me and
Mm-hmm.
where I want my soul to go. Or honestly, like making my bed. I'm casting a vote that I'm going to be a person who shows like organization and also wants to take care of the space where my husband and I live.
Mm-hmm.
That's casting a vote there. Another one, when I decide to take the time to make the nutritious meal, I am casting a vote, right? So just over and over, I mean, think about all the millions of things we do. We actually are doing that over and over in our day.
Mhm.
And maybe there's some things you say, you look at your routine right now and you say, yeah, I'm proud of how I'm casting a vote. I want to be the kind of person who does this. And I'm casting a vote that way. By exercising, by going to the gym, by reaching out to my friend, because I'm going to be a good friend, by
Mhm.
serving my husband in this way. And then there's going to be some things we look at and we're like, I'm casting a vote for that. And I don't know that I want to. I don't know that that's really how I want to be showing up in the world. And so
Mhm.
then we have to ask ourselves, what is in our routine, our daily routine, that is not moving us? It's kind of actually, like he was saying, it's making us worse over time,
Mhm.
even though it's like this little thing, right? It's not like
Mhm.
it's this earth shot, it's this little thing. But it's taking us off course from New York, from Seattle. We're going to
Mhm.
end up at a totally different place.
Can you give an example of what that might be? Like, I think of your list you just gave of things in the right direction. So
Mhm.
food might be an example of making a 1% worse choice every day, and how nutritionally that could, over time, you end up in a place where Cheetos are the norm
Yeah,
rather than the exception.
totally. I think that's a
Mhm.
really good example. I think any time waster
Mhm.
is a good example. And what I mean by time waster, because there are times that we just need to not be producing, So
Mhm.
I'm not saying that you shouldn't have times where you're just, sitting on a couch and not doing anything. But as we go back to, and people can go visit the episode with Dr. Sandra Dalton, who speaks on ways to really rest, like 7 different
Mhm.
ways of rest. But I think it is really insightful that there are ways to rejuvenate. And then there are things that we do that are supposedly like downtime that actually make us more stressed and
Mhm.
actually
Yes.
don't rejuvenate us at all. And I mean, I hate to always throw social media under the bus, but that is one way that we actually invest. We cast a vote there. And I often can spend too much time on there. And then my brain actually is not walking away rested after being on social
Mhm.
media. And so, even how am I using that? And how I'm using that determines whether it's going to help me or hurt me. And so I'm not saying social media is bad. And, you and I both use it for different things. And hopefully, one of the ways I'm showing up there is encouragement. I mean, that's one of my big values on social media. And so I want to cast a vote positively when I am on it, but there are many times where I'm just passively taking it in. And now that's casting a vote the other way, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And so, it can go either way. And then there's just some habits that we're casting a vote, maybe on numbing behaviors that aren't good.
Mhm.
And, maybe it's drinking too much or spending too much time on Netflix, or because we're just binge watching over and over and over. It was Kelly Minter. I love that line that she said in our podcast interview with her, where she said, are we watching Netflix to like rejuvenate and like, have just a fun night? Or are we watching Netflix to fuel us for another episode and another movie and another, so that it becomes almost an end in of itself?
Mhm.
That is like, whoa. I mean, that's really good. It's really insightful. And so I think some of, and fill in the blank, we all have our poison of choice, so to speak. And so just fill it in, whatever it is, and only you know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably a good question to ask
Mhm.
is, okay, this puts me off course 2 degrees.
Hmm.
Where does it take me 6 months from now? Or where does it take me a month from now if I keep going in this direction? And yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. So why this time of year? I mean, right now we're talking about it on purpose. Why is now a good time to be talking?
I do think you mentioned that in the beginning, and if you want to say anything else about that, but I just think fall is the natural time where we reset and we just decide, okay, whether we have kids in school or not, but let's get back in a routine. Let's get back to the basics, so to speak, the fundamentals. And I do love that about sports, that when we look at really good teams, they focus on the fundamentals. And that's something that um, Any sports buff will tell you that the best teams are not always the most flashy teams. The best teams are the ones that come back to the fundamentals over and over and over again and master them, and the small aspects of that. And I think that's what we're doing in the fall is we're like, okay, back to the fundamentals. We're going to get, our schedules in order. We're going to get communication back on deck. We are going to work out meals so that we're having family dinners together. If you have a family, just kind of like, we're going to get back on track here and go back to the basics.
Yeah. Or just I'm going to take healthier lunches to work or
Yeah,
whatever it is. It's the time. Now's the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're adults now.
Yeah.
Now's the time to be in charge of the routines. Okay. So what keeps us from that? If we know, okay, this is good for me, but I'm still not doing it, or I'm trying to do it and I keep failing. Why do people struggle with incorporating daily routines if they're so good for us?
Yeah. Well, I'll just say mine because these are mine. And one is that I don't make pre-decisions. So pre-decisions are critical because when we pre-decide to do something, and this goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, that you have decision fatigue. But sometimes it's not decision fatigue. Sometimes we just don't decide. And so we don't do it. So we don't decide the night before, I'm going to do this in my workout tomorrow. And here's where I'm going to go to do that, whether it's in my basement or it's at the gym or whatever. I mean, I'm still in knee rehab because my knee rehab has not gone well. But so I have to pre-decide the day before, am I doing this because I have a really hard circuit I do for my knee and it's not something I look forward to. And if I don't pre-decide the night before, I'm probably not going to do it. So, how are we making pre-decisions that take the decision out? So we just know this is what we're doing the next day. The other thing, go ahead.
There's a mental element to that. Like I'm deciding, so I'm going to do it. But there's also a logistics end to that, right? So that means I have to get up at 5:45 because I'm going to go to the gym or whatever it is. So there's a double whammy there on the pre-decision.
There really is. And I think too, so this is where we get into some neuroscience, and you know that I love to geek out on this stuff, but there is a very real thing happening in your brain. And that is that your brain doesn't want to work hard. It doesn't want to work harder than it has to. So it goes on autopilot, right? And it wants to go on autopilot, and it doesn't want to, you will easily talk yourself out of things if it's hard. And a part of that is just that your brain doesn't always want to do hard things. And so you literally have to boss it. You've got to take it off autopilot and put it into the direct mode network. And you have to boss your brain and say, this is what I'm doing. And then it will fall in line. But it's not going to just fall in line because it's not necessarily the easier choice if you don't make that pre-decision.
So by not wanting to do hard things, it's not just your brain doesn't want to work hard itself. It also wants to prevent you from doing emotionally hard things and physically hard things. It's helping you avoid pain in different areas of your life.
Again, this is actually a gift of the brain, right? Ultimately, the way it's designed is that it does help us avoid things that are harmful for us, or it helps us to not have to think about every little decision that we make, right? That's ultimately a really good thing, and it benefits us in our lives. Where it becomes negative is when we kind of allow it to exactly do those avoidance behaviors or avoid the things that we know are good for us. And we'll default to that. And that's where we have to boss it and say, no, this is actually what I'm doing tomorrow let's say we really need to have that hard conversation in order to move forward. And that's going to be a part of I know this is a little bit different than what we're talking about in our daily routines, but maybe one of the routines we need to start incorporating is better communication with someone in our life. And so what would that look like, to really not only create that routine of, okay, here's how we're going to communicate differently this fall, but also telling our brains we're going to have that initial hard conversation that is then going to get us over that hump to be able to get to that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gets back to the double whammy of the decision, I'm doing it, and the logistics. This is how it's going to happen.
Yeah. And then I'd say the other thing is, and this is just for me again, and you can tell me what yours are that prevents you from doing it, but I always think things will take less time than they do. Literally every day, this is my challenge, is that I always think I can do.
Hi. Yeah, it's true. I always think things will, and here's the other thing. I think I'm going to be in a perfect world that I can control. So I think I'm going to have this morning routine, and everyone's going to sleep as long as I want them to sleep and not interrupt me. And nobody's going to be sick and need to go to the doctor. And nobody's going to wake up with a nightmare. And nobody's going to ask me to make their sandwich for lunch, whatever it is. So I picture my environment being this utopia that is not real.
Right.
And then my plans go really well. I have a really nice morning routine. But that is part of it. And I would say also trying to not change 1%, but trying to change 20%.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to improve by 20% starting tomorrow, instead of saying, how about just one. And then if that works, we're going to add another 1%.
Mm-hmm.
And if that works, because over the course of a year, that would be improving by 365%.
Yes.
If I could do that every day. So if I don't, that's still okay, because I can still improve by 100%.
By a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got to have those kinds of conversations in my head.
That is, I mean, it's a good way to look at it. And the other coaching tip I would say is, one of the things I do with clients is I help them identify what are obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something we don't do either very well, is we don't say, like, what are the obstacles that are probably going to, at least if not every day, a lot of days, get in my way of doing this, and then anticipate those and have a plan for those, as opposed to being thrown off by those all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think that's good. Okay. Let's talk about some routines, some things that might be helpful to people as they look at their fall. What are some common ones, or ones that you think are important as far as setting some markers throughout our day that help us thrive?
So I actually spent a lot of the spring last year doing like a whole download on my website that is based in research on what are the daily habits that people can incorporate that move them to that 1% better. And it really was eye-opening for me too, as I was researching it and creating it, because I just did a daily dozen. Like, here are 12 habits, and you can go download it on my homepage, but here are 12 habits that literally make a difference, not only in your physical body, but in your in kind of mind, body, soul space, right? And these really do move the ball forward. And I think it's back to James Clear when he says, we think they have to be earth shattering, when actually it's getting up and making your bed.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually getting up and moving your body for 20 minutes. So those would be two. So let me just read you a little bit of the research behind, like, even those two, which I think is so interesting. So making your bed, let's just take that one. In Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit, which I've talked about on the show before, I love that book. It's another highly recommend. He noted that making your bed establishes a direct link to better productivity and overall health. When you make your bed, it helps you to be more productive throughout the day and invest your time in other healthier habits. In other words, it's one of the first dominoes that sets all of the others in motion.
Mm-hmm.
So simple.
It gets to that messaging to yourself. What kind of person do I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want and I will just tell listeners, I have lived years of my life not making my bed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When my kids were little and I was like trying to take naps at 2:00 in the afternoon, and I just didn't have 5 minutes, or making my bed doesn't even take 5 minutes, 2 minutes to make that a priority. So I know that it can be a hard thing. I also know, as a person who has lived that way, how lovely it is to walk into my room with a made bed. And I would say my husband has followed my lead in that now we are people who make our bed. So if I don't get to it because I'm in the kitchen, I come into the room sometimes and the bed is made.
Mm-hmm.
So that message of I want to be the kind of person who is also translated to the we. So within your household, whoever you live with, it can have a trickle down effect.
Yeah. And I think it's that I really like the domino visual because I think that's helpful, right? Is we want to set the dominoes of positivity of our lives in motion. And that's just a really simple domino. I mean, it takes me no more than 2 minutes to make my bed, but it's that domino effect. And then the other one I mentioned, which we all know exercise is good for us, but here's something you may not know, is that it may only take 20 minutes a day for it to have really lasting long-term benefit. So research shows that a 20-minute workout can elevate your mood for up to 12 hours, increase the production of a protein that supports the function, growth, and survival of brain cells, and is one of the 5 daily habits that a Harvard study shows that can not only increase your lifespan by 12 to 14 years, just that little thing,
Gosh,
but cuts your risk of Alzheimer's in half. In half.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's astounding. That is a whole lot of benefit, including it being a stress reducer and all that, mental clarity, all of that for 20 minutes a day, 20 minutes. Now, granted, in this study, you can't just like lollygag. Like the 20 minutes, you've got to sweat, right? Like you've got to actually boost, work your heart hard enough that you're sweating, but it's only 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Huge.
And I will say, this is one of those things that may be personality. I am much more likely to think, what's the benefit for me today than what's the benefit for me 20 years from now? And maybe there are some people who are like, oh, no, I want to do that because of the 20 years from now. So there's probably benefit to knowing the day one on the 1% degree different for the flight plan, and then the 20-year difference for the flight plan, and how you're going to end up in a totally different spot.
Yes. And there's enough, right, research out. Again, like this is all research based, and there's enough research out that shows the daily benefits of exercise, right? So you have less stress. It's a natural mood booster. You don't have that brain fog that you have normally. Exercise helps clear that. I mean, it brings down your automatic nervous system. I mean, it regulates your emotions. I mean, it's just like the list is endless, honestly. Okay, so the last one I want to call out that maybe some people are not doing, and this has actually challenged me to do this, is to read two pages in a book a day.
Okay.
Do you wonder why?
Yes. And I also wonder, does it matter if it's paper or electronic? Do you know? Okay. We let's skip that question.
I don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I actually want to know that, but I don't know that.
Okay.
So we all know about the research around sleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the Sleeps Foundation discovered that 35% of Americans sleep fewer than 7 hours a night, and 50% of Americans feel sleepy 3 to 7 days a week. So, one of the ways that we are looking at is, so how do we create better sleep? Because even when we are asleep, we're not necessarily sleeping well. And
Mm-hmm.
some of that has to do with the time we're going to bed, right? Because we know the hours before midnight are better quality than the hours after midnight, some of those kinds of things. But one of the ways we can really improve our sleep is by reading before bed. So I'm going to say a physical book, because I do think not having like the blue light is a big
Mm-hmm.
deal. So we have to eliminate blue light. And I know some reading devices don't have blue light, but still. So we're beginning to understand that reading helps us in multiple ways. And one is it helps us reduce stress. So they've done actual brain studies on this. It does improve our sleep quality, and it improves mental agility and cognition. So, what I like about this is that it's kind of working for our benefit in many ways. It's making us sharper and keeping our brains kind of fired up as we age, while at the same time reducing our stress and helping us sleep better. It's like really interesting, because you think it's like two sides of the coin there. So can we all do 2 pages a day? We can. I mean, that's where I really like that 1%. Like, you don't have to read a whole chapter. You don't even have
Mm-hmm.
to, it's just read 2 pages. Read 2 pages in a book that helps you to gain that mental sharpness, but also is going to help you on that before bed routine, which let's talk about, because many of us are really good at our morning routines and we're not so good at our before bed routines. So, Alex, how are you resetting your night routine this fall?
Yeah, I feel like this is a really big area for me that I want to work on this fall. Like I said, I like getting up in the morning. I like the start of the day. I like the early morning is my favorite time of day. I'm a morning person. So I think part of my challenge historically with evening routines is that I'm exhausted by the time I go to bed, because I do get up early and everybody else is still awake and going. And so I am trying to kind of keep up with the household instead of starting to wind down at the time that works for my sleep schedule. So I need to be better about saying, okay, it's 9 o'clock. I'm going to start thinking about all of the things I need to do to get myself ready to close the day, to end the day. But it will be easier once school's in session, because kids won't be up as late. So that will be helpful. I want to do a better job of cleaning up the common areas at night. Again, often because I go to bed exhausted. So there's dirty dishes in the sink and I wake up to that, and I don't mind because I have more energy in the morning. But I know I'll be doing my morning self a gift if I do a little bit of work in the evening. And so just even straightening up the living room, whatever it is, that when I walk out in the morning, when I get up and I go to get my cup of coffee, is going to be helpful. And then
Or designating it to other people
yeah,
who
for
are
sure.
still up.
Thank you for being my friend and thinking of me. Yes. Though I think in the fall, we will be more going to bed at the same time. But just that mindful element of, I'm going to be able to really jump into things better, because I am mentally going to be able to do my best work from a work perspective in the morning. So I don't want to be catching up from the night before. And I often feel like I'm catching up from the night before. And then just at the end of the workday, I want to do a better job of having kind of a closing ceremony of, I am transitioning from work mode to home mode without leaving my home, because I work at home. So I am finding this summer, as I'm working later in the day, that it can just bleed in a little more, and it can get a little murky on, am I still working? Am I not still working? And it's because other people are starting to need me more, and I don't give myself that clarity of, okay, I'm done with this, so that I can fully focus on this. Or no, I can't focus on that right now because I need to finish this. So I want to have a clearer point of closing my computer, saying a blessing over it, and then going to be with my family and telling myself the work will be there in the morning. It's okay. And I have to undo, this is what I have to do. I have to undo a lot of years of habit of fitting things in when I could fit them in. And because I'm wanting to have more of that free time in the evening, I wrote books at night because Derek was home, and so he could be in charge of the kids when they were little. Well, I don't need someone to be doing childcare, right? I now have my days available to do work.
Right.
So that's what I'm working on for my evening routines. I feel like that's my area of growth more than the morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Though
That's
the
so
evening
good.
is going to impact the morning, because I will be walking into a clean kitchen. So,
Yes. Yeah. And just switching that mindset of what evening is for, right? It's almost like
yes.
doing that heart work too, of being like, okay, evening is for this. Now it's not for this. And maybe before it was for that. So it's doing that mindset work a little bit too.
Yeah, because I developed those habits when my kids were home all day when they were little, and I was getting time with them during the day. And now they're not home. So if I want to spend time with them, and we're out and about more at night now, once school and sports start up again.
Right.
Yeah. What about you? What are you working on as far as daily routines this fall?
For me, I want to get back into kind of creative meal planning. So I've been doing a lot of grilling over the summer, which I always love. A lot of kind of, let's figure out what we're having tonight. But I really do want to do some creative meal planning this fall. So getting back on that. And what that looks like is just setting on Sunday what we're having every day of the week. And then I've got it at least in my head. I know how it's prepped by 10 a.m. It's just one of my things. So that's that. I want to get back on that. And then the other thing is I want to have blocks of time where I'm doing deep work, where I'm making myself do deep work. So what I mean by that is my brain actually doesn't always want to do deep work. It wants to take breaks and go do other things and go have a snack or, whatever it is. And just those blocks of time in my routine, and I set them ahead of time. And I know I'm sitting down and I am doing this hard thing. I'm doing this hard project and I'm not getting up. I am not allowing my brain to tell me it's too hard, right? Get that back to that brain thing. I'm going to boss my brain and tell it, no, you are doing this deep work right now. And I am fearful of that in my own brain that, I'm reading a lot of research that actually says our brains aren't wanting to do deep work anymore because we're not making them do deep work. And I'm afraid of that because I see it in myself. And so it's kind of my way of fighting that.
So when you say deep work, can you define that a little?
Yeah. So anything that requires a lot of brain power and pushing, like it's not easy. So sometimes for me, that is like writing a curriculum. That's something I'm working on right now. It's hard. It's deep work. And my brain would love to go do something else that's more fun. Maybe create a reel on Instagram or, whatever, right? Something that's easy for me, something that doesn't require me to think very hard. A course requires me to think really hard. And so I have to force myself to create blocks of time where I'm really making myself do the hard work of that deep thinking. And I think we're all facing that. I think we're all in that place of Our brains are being trained just by the nature of the time we're living in. It's no fault of anyone's, but our brains are being trained to just move very quickly from one thing to the next, and to do a little bit of what's easy instead of what's hard. And that's just something I feel like personally I'm constantly trying to fight against.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think deep work is for you?
Well, I'm just wondering if it can be transferred to other things that may not be like creative work, but are hard things that people are resisting. So maybe like doing a budget or working, paying my bills. I don't want to do that because I don't want to face the reality of that. Or having a hard conversation, calling someone and being like, I've been putting this off forever, but I need to talk to this person about this. Would that fit in that as well?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it gets back to that point of whatever feels hard to us feels like it's more effort. So maybe that's a different way we can say it, is it requires more effort from us. And that effort may be physical, it may be emotional, it may be brain, power wise, but it just requires a lot more effort.
Mm-hmm. So do you do something like set a timer? How do you set up boundaries for yourself to boss your brain around?
Right. So, well, first of all, I have to turn off all the notifications on every device. And then I also have to be in quiet. So I can't have distractions. I'm too distractible. So I have to have quiet. And then I have to decide, here's the amount of time I'm putting in. So our brains work in about 90-minute increments. And so I keep that in mind too, that I'm going to work for 90 minutes. I'm going to give myself a little break, and then I'm going to dive back in and maybe do one more, either hour or 90-minute stint. And that's just how this fall, I'm really going to try and structure in some of those times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've found that having places that my brain knows this is where I work, like my
Yes.
desk. I try to reserve my desk for when
Mm-hmm.
I am working on hard projects or just, like this is where I get work done. This isn't where I scroll for vacation planning. Or
Yes.
this isn't where I, check on Facebook. This
Mm-hmm.
is where I get work done, because my brain, I think, my body responds to,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is work mode. And then it also helps me when I'm trying to do that closing ceremony of the day. Like
Yeah.
I'm walking away from here. I may pick up my computer to look at something, but it's not going to be work related. And I'm not going to be sitting in this chair.
Right. That's so good. So good. All right, everyone. Well, happy fall. We want to hear how you are resetting for the fall and really setting yourself up for success. So tell us, we want to know. Leave a review on iTunes or hop over to Instagram or respond to our newsletter. If you're not on our newsletter yet, be sure to do that. Sign up on the opendorssisterhood.com. And we want to hear from you what you are doing this fall to set yourself or your family up for success. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.